I spent 20 years building our family tech company from Dad's garage startup to $100 million in revenue. Then he called a family meeting and said, I'm handing everything over to Sarah, my sister, who joined the company 3 years ago, fresh from college. I smiled, congratulated her, and walked out. What they didn't know was that I'd seen this coming, and I'd already built something they couldn't destroy. My name is Michael Thompson, 42 years old, former VP of Operations at Thompson Digital Solutions in Denver, Colorado. Until yesterday, I was also the heir apparent, or so I thought. Let me take you back to 1995. Dad was working out of our garage, trying to sell business software to anyone who would listen. I was 22, fresh out of Colorado State, with a computer science degree. While my friends were partying or traveling, I was sitting on a milk crate in that garage, teaching myself how to fix printers and debug code. Dad would come back from sales calls, frustrated because he couldn't explain how the software actually worked. Michael, he'd say, you need to help me make sense of this technology stuff. I became his translator. When Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop called because her inventory system crashed, I'd drive over with my toolkit. When the dentist office needed their scheduling software customized, I'd spend weekends figuring it out. No task was too small, no problem too complex. Dad started introducing me as my son, the technical genius. I liked that. Sarah was different. 5 years younger. She was the academic star. While I was learning programming languages, she was learning actual languages, French, Spanish, Mandarin. She went to Harvard for her MBA while I was rebuilding our entire code base from scratch. She worked at McKinsey while I was hiring our first team of developers. We were both successful, just in completely different worlds. By 2005, I transformed us from a one-man operation to a serious software company. We had 15 employees, our own office building, and clients across 3 states. I'd written the core architecture that everything ran on: customer management, billing, reporting, everything. Dad would walk through the office and point at screens showing our software. That's all Michael's work, he'd tell visitors. He built it from nothing. The big breakthrough came in 2008. While everyone else was panicking about the economy, I saw an opportunity. Small businesses needed affordable cloud solutions, but nobody was serving that market properly. I spent 8 months developing what would become our flagship product, a complete business management suite that small companies could access online for a fraction of what enterprise solutions cost. We're going to call it SmartBridge, I told Dad, showing him the interface. It bridges the gap between what small businesses need and what they can afford. Dad stared at the screen for a long time, then looked at me. Michael, this is brilliant. This could change everything. He was right. Within 2 years, we had 10,000 clients. Within 5, we had 50,000. I hired faster than I'd ever imagined, building teams for development, support, implementation. Every new feature, every optimization, every integration, I was involved in designing it all. Dad focused on sales and strategy. I focused on making everything work. By 2015, we were hitting $10 million annual revenue. Dad started talking about expansion plans, new markets, maybe even going public someday. Michael, he'd say during our weekly strategic meetings, you've built something incredible here. This is your legacy. That's when Sarah joined us. She'd been working at McKinsey for 8 years, specializing in digital transformation for large companies. Dad mentioned over Christmas dinner that she was thinking about leaving to join a startup. Why not our startup? He said, half joking. Sarah laughed. Dad, you're hardly a startup anymore. But the idea stuck. 3 months later, Sarah was sitting in Dad's office, talking about bringing her strategic planning expertise to Thompson Digital. We need someone who understands the business side. Dad explained to me afterward. You're brilliant with technology, but we need to think bigger. I wasn't threatened. Sarah was family, and she genuinely had skills we could use. When Dad created the position of strategic planning director for her, I welcomed her to the team. I gave her access to our systems, explained our architecture, showed her how everything connected. Sarah was impressive. She asked smart questions, understood business processes quickly, and saw opportunities one might have missed. Within 6 months, she'd identified 3 potential partnerships that could expand our market reach. "See," Dad said proudly. Fresh perspective is exactly what we needed. But something subtle began to change. In meetings, Sarah would ask about technical decisions I'd made. "Why did we choose this particular database structure?" she'd inquire. I'd explain the reasoning, and she'd nod thoughtfully. Then, a week later, she'd present her insight about database optimization to the board. It started small. A suggestion here, a recommendation there. But gradually, Sarah began positioning herself as the bridge between technology and business strategy. "Michael knows how to build things," she'd say. "I know how to position them for growth." Dad loved it. He'd always felt intimidated by the technical details, and Sarah made everything sound so clear and strategic. At board meetings, he'd defer to her for explanations about our technical capabilities. "Sarah understands both sides," he'd say. "That's what leadership looks like in the modern tech industry." Meanwhile, I kept building. We launched our AI-powered workflow automation tool. We integrated with major CRM platforms. We expanded to Austin and Seattle. Revenue hit $50 million, then $75 million. Every milestone, every innovation, I was the one designing and implementing it. But the credit was slowly shifting. In press interviews, Sarah would talk about our transformative technology platform and the strategic vision driving our growth. Reporters would describe her as the business-minded leader guiding the company's technical innovation. I'd read these articles and feel a growing unease. The real shift happened last year. Dad had been talking about succession planning, not immediate, but thinking ahead. During one of our quarterly family dinners, he brought it up casually. "Eventually, we'll need to think about the next generation taking over." Sarah leaned forward. "I've been thinking about that too. The tech industry is changing so rapidly. Leadership today requires a different skill set than it did 20 years ago." Dad nodded. "What do you mean?" "Well," Sarah continued, "technical expertise is crucial, but strategic vision and business acumen are what really drive success in today's market. Look at the most successful tech companies. Their CEOs aren't necessarily the ones who wrote the first code." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just an observation. This was positioning. Over the following months, the narrative crystallized. Dad started including Sarah in investor meetings where she'd present business strategies. He'd ask her opinion on technical directions, even though she'd never written a line of code. In board meetings, conversations shifted from how we build to how we grow. "Michael," Dad said to me one day, "you built an incredible foundation, but growing from here requires different skills." The final piece fell into place 6 months ago. The board, which now included 2 outside investors Sarah had cultivated, began discussing organizational evolution. They brought in a consultant who specialized in leadership transitions for scaling tech companies. I saw where this was heading, but instead of fighting it, I started preparing. 3 years ago, when I first noticed the subtle shifts, I'd begun working on something independent, not out of any malicious intent, just curiosity. During evenings and weekends, I've been developing a next-generation business intelligence platform, something beyond what we offered at Thomson Digital, something that could predict business trends, automate decision-making, truly revolutionize how companies operate. I called it Project Athena, named after the Greek goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. I was careful. I used my own equipment, my own time, my own resources. I filed the proper IP documentation to ensure it was clearly separate from Thomson Digital. I even consulted with a lawyer to make sure everything was above board. As Sarah's star rose at Thomson Digital, Project Athena quietly evolved. I recruited 3 engineers from my personal network, people I'd mentored over the years who'd moved on to other companies. Jake Martinez, who'd been our lead developer before starting his own consulting firm. Lisa Chun, a data scientist I'd hired straight from MIT, who'd left to pursue her PhD. Robert Wilson, a systems architect who'd worked under me for 5 years. "What you're building," Jake said, reviewing my early prototypes. This is revolutionary. This goes way beyond anything Thomson Digital offers. I nodded. That's the point. This isn't about competition. This is about innovation. But I knew it was more than that. Call it intuition, call it preparation, call it covering my bases. Part of me sensed that one day, Thomson Digital might not have room for both Sarah and me at the top. The family meeting happened on a Sunday afternoon. Dad called it for his office, which already felt ominous. Family meetings at home were normal. Family meetings at the office meant business. Sarah arrived first, looking composed and professional. Mom came in looking slightly uncomfortable, which told me she knew what was coming. Dad waited until we were all seated, then cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about legacy and succession," he began, "about what this company needs to thrive in the next decade." My heart started beating faster, but I kept my expression neutral. "Michael," Dad continued, "you've been the backbone of our operations for 20 years. Everything we built runs on systems you created. Your technical expertise is unmatched, a compliment sandwich." I knew what was coming next. "But," he said, and there was, "leadership in today's tech industry requires a different skill set. Business acumen, strategic vision, the ability to navigate complex partnerships and investor relationships." Sarah shifted slightly in her chair, but her expression remained carefully neutral. "Sarah will be taking over as CEO," Dad announced. "She'll be guiding the next phase of our growth. The board is confident this is the right direction." The room fell silent. I looked at Sarah, who met my eyes with a mixture of triumph and something that might have been sympathy. I looked at Mom, who was staring at her hands. I looked at Dad, who was watching me carefully, probably expecting an explosion. Instead, I smiled. "Congratulations, Sarah," I said, standing up. "I'm sure you'll do great things with the company." The surprise on all their faces was almost worth it. I shook hands with everyone, told Dad I'd help with whatever transition was needed, and left. No drama, no arguments, no emotional outburst, just professional grace and a growing sense of freedom, because they had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I walked into Thomson Digital with my usual coffee and my usual routine. People nodded good morning, asked about weekend plans, treated me exactly the same as always. Only a few senior managers had been informed about the change, and the official announcement wouldn't come until Wednesday. I spent the day doing what I'd always done, reviewing code, discussing architecture decisions, solving problems. But there was a different quality to everything now. I wasn't just doing my job. I was observing, really observing. Over lunch, I walked through the engineering department, watching people work on systems I designed, seeing code structures I created, watching algorithms I'd written process millions of transactions. This was my life's work. My intellectual DNA was woven into every line of code that kept this company running. That evening, I called Jake Martinez. "Mike," he answered enthusiastically. "How's the Empire?" "Actually," I said, "that's what I'm calling about. Want to grab dinner? There's something I need to discuss." We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. Jake listened while I explained what had happened, nodding slowly. "So Sarah's CEO now," he said when I finished. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, relieved." Jake raised an eyebrow. "That's not what I expected you to say." I leaned back in the booth. "Jake, I've been carrying this company on my shoulders for 20 years. Every technical decision, every architectural choice, every system integration. I love it, but I've been constrained, building within someone else's vision. And now," I smiled, "now it's time to show them what real innovation looks like." I told him about Project Athena. Jake's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "You've been working on this for 3 years?" Without saying anything, I had a feeling this day might come. Called it preparation. Now it feels more like liberation. 2 days later, Sarah addressed the entire company. She stood in our main conference room, which could hold about half our employees, with the rest joining via video link. "As you know, Thomson Digital has been family-owned and operated for almost 30 years, she began. "Today marks a new chapter in our story." She spoke about innovation, growth, market opportunities. She praised Dad's vision and my technical contributions. She outlined her plans for expansion, including potential partnerships with major enterprise clients and possible acquisition opportunities. It was a good speech. Professional, confident, forward-looking. The staff applauded appropriately. After the meeting, people approached me with mix of curiosity and concern. Some had figured out what this meant for my role. Others just wanted reassurance that nothing major would change. "You'll still be here, right?" asked Monica, one of our senior developers. "You're not going anywhere?" "I'll be here for the transition," I assured her. Sarah and I both want what's best for the company. That wasn't a lie. I did want what was best for Thomson Digital. I just wasn't sure Sarah and I agreed on what that meant. Over the next week, I watched Sarah settle into her new role. She scheduled individual meetings with department heads, reviewed strategic plans, spoke with our major clients. She was thorough, professional, clearly committed to success. But I also noticed other things. She hired an outside consultant to review our technology architecture. When I asked about it, she said it was just to ensure we're positioned for optimal scalability. She scheduled a board meeting to discuss organizational structure optimization. When I asked if I'd be attending, she said it wasn't necessary, just high-level strategic discussion. She began meeting regularly with Oracle, ostensibly about potential partnership opportunities. But I'd seen those Oracle executives before. They weren't partnership people. They were acquisition people. The pieces were falling into place. Sarah wasn't just planning to run Thomson Digital differently. She was planning to sell it. I accelerated my timeline for Project Athena. Working nights and weekends, sometimes until 3 a.m., I refined the core algorithms. The system was beautiful. It could analyze business data patterns in real time, predict market trends with 87% accuracy, automate strategic decision-making processes that currently required teams of analysts. Lisa Chin flew in from Boston to help with the machine learning components. "Michael," she said, reviewing my work, "this is going to change everything. This makes current business intelligence tools look like pocket calculators." "I know," I replied. "That's the point. Robert Wilson worked remotely, building the cloud infrastructure. I've never seen anything this elegant," he told me during one of our video calls. The scalability architecture alone is worth millions. 3 weeks after Sarah became CEO, I made my first external move. I reached out to David Chun at Innovate Ventures, a firm that had approached me twice before about joining their portfolio companies. "Michael Thompson," David said, "genuinely pleased to hear from me. I was wondering when you'd call. I'm working on something new," I told him. "Something that goes beyond traditional business intelligence. Something that could fundamentally change how companies make decisions." David didn't need much convincing. We'd had enough conversations over the years that he understood my technical vision and track record. "How much runway do you need?" he asked. $5 million for Series A, 18 months to market. "Let's talk." Meanwhile, Thomson Digital was beginning to show cracks. Small ones, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. The first sign was a bug in our billing system. Nothing major, just some edge cases that caused incorrect calculations for certain client configurations. Normally, I would have caught it during routine reviews, but I was no longer part of the daily technical oversight. The support team escalated it to our current development lead, Maria Santos. Maria was good. I'd hired and trained her personally, but she wasn't familiar with the deeper implications of this particular system's architecture. She fixed the immediate bug, but missed the underlying pattern that had caused it. I saw the fix in the weekly code review and realized it was treating symptoms, not the disease. But I didn't say anything. I was still officially involved, but my role was transitioning to advisory. The second sign was performance degradation. Our main processing server started experiencing occasional slowdowns during peak usage periods. The symptoms were subtle. Response times increasing from 0.2 seconds to 0.3 seconds. Success rates dropping from 99.97% to 99.91%. Statistically insignificant. Operationally, a warning sign. Again, the team addressed the immediate symptoms. They added more servers, optimized some queries, increased cache sizes, but they didn't address the root cause: architectural decisions I made 5 years ago that worked perfectly at 50,000 clients, but started showing limitations at 75,000. I'd been planning to refactor those systems next quarter. Now, that was someone else's problem. 1 month after Sarah became CEO, she called me into her office. She sat behind Dad's old desk, our old desk, looking professional and composed. "Michael," she said, "I want to thank you for how smoothly this transition has gone. Your professionalism has been appreciated." "Of course," I replied. "We're family." She nodded, "which is why I want to discuss the future. Your future specifically." I waited. "Oracle has reached out about acquiring Thomson Digital," she said, matter-of-factly. "It's early discussions, but the numbers are substantial." "How substantial?" "Potentially in the $150 million range." I kept my expression neutral. "That's quite an offer." "It is. But here's the thing, Michael. Oracle's primary interest is in our client base and market position. They have their own technology stack. They wouldn't need all of our current technical infrastructure." "Ah, there it was. They'd be bringing their own engineering teams," she continued, "migrating everything to their platforms. It's standard practice for acquisitions of this size." "I see. What this means is that while the deal will be financially beneficial for all of us, especially you with your equity stake, the operational role for our current technical team would be limited." I nodded slowly. "So you're saying my job would disappear?" "I'm saying your specific expertise becomes redundant in their ecosystem." We looked at each other across the desk. My sister, who I'd watched grow up, who I'd taught to ride a bike, who was now explaining why selling everything I'd built was actually good for me. When would this happen? I asked. The due diligence process alone would take 6 months. Implementation, another 12 to 18. Nothing would change immediately. "I appreciate you telling me," I said, standing up. "Let me give this some thought." That night, I worked on Project Athena until dawn. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because each line of code I wrote, each algorithm I optimized, was building something that was entirely mine. The next day, I called Dad. "Dad, it's Michael. Can we have lunch?" Just the two of us. We met at Romano's, a little Italian place we'd been going to for 15 years. Dad looked tired, older somehow. "How are you adjusting?" he asked as we sat down. "Fine," I said. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about the Oracle situation." Dad's face changed subtly. "Sarah told you." "She did. I understand financial appeal." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Michael, you have to understand. The valuation they're offering, it's more than we ever dreamed possible. Enough to secure the family's future, fund retirements, leave something substantial for grandkids." "I get it, Dad." "Do you?" "Because I need you to know that this isn't about what you contributed. You built this company. Every system, every innovation. I know that." I nodded. "But," Dad continued, "sometimes opportunities come along that you can't ignore. This is bigger than any of us." "What about the employees? The people who've been with us for years?" Dad winced. "Oracle will retain key personnel, and everyone would get substantial severance packages." I sipped my coffee, thinking, "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you started this company, what did you want? Really want?" Dad looked out the window. "I wanted to build something. Something that would last. Something that would make a difference for families like ours. And now," he was quiet for a long moment, "now I want to make sure our family is secure. Sarah's right that we can't compete with the big players forever. Better to cash out at the top than watch the value decline." I nodded. "I understand." And I did understand. I just disagreed. That weekend, I made 3 important calls. First, to Maria Santos. "Maria, I know this puts you in an awkward position, but I want you to know that I'm planning to leave Thomson Digital. When Sarah asks, and she will, you can tell her you know about my plans." Maria was quiet. Then, "We all saw this coming, Michael. What are you going to do? Build something new." Second, to David Chen at Innovate Ventures. David, it's Michael Thompson. I'm ready to move forward with funding. Excellent. When can you start full-time? 2 weeks. Third, to Jake Martinez. Jake, remember how you said Project Athena was revolutionary? How would you like to be CTO of the company that's going to prove that? Jake laughed. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. Monday morning, I walked into Thomson Digital, knowing it would be one of my last days. I had meetings scheduled, code reviews to complete, a transition plan to finalize. But first, I had a conversation with Sarah. Sarah, I said, stopping by her office, do you have a minute? She looked up from her laptop. Of course. I want to let you know that I'll be submitting my resignation today. The surprise on her face was genuine. Michael, what? Why? I've been thinking about what you said regarding the Oracle acquisition, about my role becoming redundant. I think it's better if I make a clean break now, rather than waiting for the inevitable. But, Michael, we need you for the transition. Oracle will want to understand our current systems. I smiled. Everything they need is documented. Maria Santos can handle the technical explanations. She knows our architecture as well as anyone. That wasn't entirely true. Maria knew what I'd taught her, but there were subtleties, architectural decisions, evolutionary patterns that existed only in my head. But I wasn't obligated to make Oracle's life easier. Where will you go? Sarah asked. I'm starting something new, something independent. For a moment, Sarah looked almost vulnerable. Michael, I hope you know that none of this is personal. The Oracle deal, the changes, it's business. I stood up. I know, Sarah, and I hope you can understand that my leaving isn't personal either. I just want to build something where I can have complete creative control. That afternoon, I cleaned out my office for the second time in 6 weeks. This time, there was no sadness, no sense of ending, only the excitement of beginning. I sent my resignation email at 5 p.m. sharp. After 20 years of incredible growth and innovation, I've decided to pursue new challenges. Thank you to everyone who's been part of this amazing journey. I'm excited about what Thomson Digital will accomplish in its next chapter. Simple, professional, final. The responses came quickly. Colleagues expressing surprise and support. Maria asking if there was room at my new venture. Dad calling to say he understood and wished me well. Sarah sent a single text. Good luck, Michael. I hope you find what you're looking for. I texted back. I already have. 2 weeks later, I sat in a conference room in Boston, surrounded by engineers from some of the best tech companies in the world. We were finalizing the technical architecture for what would become Athena Technologies. The beauty of this system, I explained to our new investors, is that it doesn't just process data. It understands context. It learns patterns not just in what businesses do, but why they do it. David Chen smiled. Michael, I've seen a lot of pitch presentations. This isn't a pitch. This is a technical revolution. Outside the conference room windows, Boston sparkled in the afternoon sun. 3,000 miles from Denver, from Thomson Digital, from everything I'd built and then walked away from. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Thomson Digital Solutions announced a strategic alliance with Oracle Corporation. I didn't open the article. Instead, I looked around the room at my new team, at the whiteboards covered with algorithms that would reshape how businesses make decisions, at the faces of people who were here not because they had to be, but because they believed in what we were building. For the first time in months, I felt truly free. This was just the beginning.